What's up, guys? This week we're going to be looking at another Under the Macroscope episode where we take a look at the psychic weather at large, and in this edition, getting into riots, race baiting, and NOVID-19. That's coming up next. Welcome back, my friends, to another episode of the Wizard Factory podcast, where you subscribe for weekly videos exploring deeper understanding of the universe and yourselves. My name is Logan Hart.
And I'm Brian Easterday.
Just when you thought 2020 couldn't get any fuckier.
Things are getting awful funky out there, boys.
Yeah, I know there definitely has been a lot going on in the world, and 2020 seems to be a year that just when we think it can't get any more exciting, it does. So, we thought that would be, obviously be a good time to come in and do another one of these macroscope episodes, which are really, when it comes down to it, and especially in this one, topics that we're getting into, it's really all about discernment. And making sure that you're not getting stuck into a black and white thinking, in that you're just seeing the world in this overly simplistic view. We've done an episode about that before. Getting out of the black and white thinking, and how that type of thinking really leads to dogma, but it makes people easier to sway and control. So what we're going to be doing here is looking at all the events, really using discernment and seeing, what's true, what's not, and why you have to be able to see the complexity in the situation. You don't just have to take a black and white stance on things.
Absolutely. And another thing too that ties in really well is we've actually we're getting ready to do an episode all about chaos, and a sort of adage came to mind that I didn't actually include in the episode, but I wanted to, and that's this idea of never let a crisis go to waste. Now, people usually quote that, kind of hinting towards the David Rockefellers of the world, that like I believe it was him who said that, that it's all about that, they want chaos, that way they can have more control. That is one aspect to it, and that is happening. But at the same time, to be a chaos sorcerer doesn't mean you go around causing chaos just to watch the world burn. The point is, chaos is already occurring, and you know how to tap into that and transmute that, alchemize that. So in essence, that's what these episodes are about as well, Under the Macroscope, is that there's things happening in the world that we can really use. We're creating this content, it's giving us something to riff on, something to put out in there, but for the purpose of literally holding up a mirror to the state of the collective consciousness, which this holding up the mirror concept we're going to get into in just a little bit. So stay tuned for that. If you're new to the channel, by the way, hit that subscribe button and join us for weekly episodes. And please like the video so that it reaches more people. So ultimately, we're just trying to tap into this charge as an opportunity to reflect what's happening in the world and what we can actually learn from that, so that these negative events are having at least some positive aspects as they're playing out. That's really our intention with this. So I hope that makes sense, and let's get into it. So the first thing we wanted to talk about here is the mysterious disappearance of COVID. I'm sure they're still mentioning it here and there on the news, but the level of coverage that it once was mere days ago, their tune has completely changed, and now it's just all about the riots and this new development. So we wanted to kind of talk about that. Are these rioters practicing social distancing? Are they staying 6 feet apart? I doubt it. We're doing all these things that they've tried to prevent from happening, even on a much smaller scale, in order to contain these outbreaks. Yet where is the, you know, the spikes in COVID? Or has the priorities changed? Is it that maybe things weren't working in terms of control and fear, so they had to change up their tactics a little bit because memes were absolutely shredding them to pieces?
Yeah, you know, yeah, and that's definitely something to look at. Is that how they had, you know, a narrative that they were pushing so strongly, but then all of a sudden it just, you know, pretty much just kind of falls off and disappears. You know, like I saw like a meme that had like, you know, a van or whatever. It's like they were mainstream idiot, and then it's like a person that was getting tossed out of the van. It's like COVID-19, and it's true. That's what works. Is like when one little fear tactic doesn't work, they just, you know, they just trash it and go for another. So I do find it very interesting about the timing of that, you know. So they have this COVID-19 pandemic, and then they keep people to where, you know, they're crashing the economy. You know, like a lot of these businesses, like you know, they're talking about businesses being destroyed and everything. Well, a lot of these businesses have even been like shut down for a few months. Like they destroyed the economy. Like it's not, they did way more damage than any rioters did. You know, so that, you know, that's an interesting thing to look at. But then we also saw that their whole narrative with COVID was coming apart. You know, for example, like, you know, the shit about wearing masks. We're saying that, like, you know, there's plenty of evidence coming out, you know, and studies that like it doesn't actually do anything to prevent it. In fact, you know, it's probably bad for your health. You know, which that took a lot of goddamn common sense to figure out. You know, and then we're seeing, you know, that they're like some of the numbers were like getting double counted, like in the deaths, or, you know, that they were mislabeling deaths, or, you know, all these different things. And, you know, there's even, you know, mention in here that there's like a mainstream article, you know, going around, you know, and Logan was going to hit on that here, but, you know, even that is now, even though mainstream is exposing their own bullshit. So like their whole system, their whole thing is just eating itself. Like we've talked about before, you know, in the previous episodes, you know, we talked about chaos. Like they're just, they're out of control, and it's a dying system eating itself alive. But we see this, you know, the narrative, like their illusion that they cast was getting utterly exposed to the point that, like, you know, people were going to start getting angry. So they, you know, this was a pivot. They, you know, there was something that needed done to be, you know, pivoted. And you know, again, we'll get into the riots and all that. You know, we're not saying that everything is a total conspiracy in the sense, but, you know, they, like Logan mentioned earlier, never let a good crisis go to waste. You know, that when they see the opportunity to try to latch on something, they'll take it and they'll try to blow it out of proportion and ride that until they can find the next thing. You know, the media are fucking parasites. They can't create any charge of their own. They literally just try to piggyback on any charge that's available. So as soon as one dies, it's like a parasite not having food. So they try to latch onto a new host.
And it's very much this game of tug of war, but most people think of it as the left versus the right, and they're both kind of like pulling each other for power, when actually it's a very small group of people that have been given this mysterious authoritarian power. Republicans, Democrats, it does not matter. They're on one side pulling, and everyone else, whether you're voting or you're an anarchist, it doesn't matter. Freedom is what's being pulled back and forth. And so, like, you can see that they've gained a lot of momentum with this coronavirus crisis that they've perpetuated, and so the narrative is falling apart, and they know this. So they're trying to keep what they've gained. You see, they're trying to not lose that ground back, because people are going like, this doesn't make any fucking sense. It's retarded. You know, people are like losing their jobs, losing their businesses, their lives are destroyed. And for what? A bunch of absolute nonsense. So, and then, you know, boom, out comes this whole completely seemingly random race charged police brutality of George Floyd. So the timing can't be ignored. And yeah, I wanted to mention this because I think it's a perfect, you know, macrocosmic sample, a little slide to put under the macroscope to observe here. is this little article that I came across where it's a mainstream news source, the WashingtonTimes.com, created an article that is reporting the fake news of MSM and how basically COVID-19 turning out to be a huge hoax perpetrated by MSM, says the article by the MSM. I mean, this is literally the snake eating itself right here. Like they're calling their own selves out as the clowns that they are, just to maintain credibility. Are you kidding me? And I have to mention too, on the website, you get this little pop-up on the article that's saying, opt in for their newsletter. So you get, and the headline was real, period, trustworthy, period, news. So they're equating themselves with trustworthy. And then to close the pop-up window, you have to click a thing that says, no thanks, I prefer fake news. I mean, dude, tell me that's not gaslighting to the nth degree, that they're basically saying like anyone else is fake news except us, and it's the mainstream media is bad, but that's literally what they are. I mean, it's just such like doublespeak is what it is.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, it's definitely, like I said, we've talked about it, that we see this system like really dying, and that's why they're trying to push for control so hard. They're you have to remember, like the people that are doing this are psychopaths, and one of the traits of psychopaths is narcissism, and glibness, and things like that, where they have such an elevated sense of their self that they don't think they can actually go too far. They always will underestimate everybody else, the common man, because they have such they've put themselves up on such a pedestal that they're just looking down on everyone else.
Right.
And when it comes to warfare, one of the last fucking thing you should ever do is underestimate your opponent. The moment you do that, that's a weakness that can be exploited. And we should note that, and that's the thing, is they're trying to roll out the control, because if they know if it doesn't happen, soon, it's not going to happen. And we've talked about before, no matter what they push, like if it's a system that goes against nature, if it's a system that goes against cosmic law, it can never last. Like nature will always push back, and it's in its own way. So the system, you see them in their death throes. So they're literally just, tearing themselves apart. Even with like the police, we see like with, and we'll get more into this point a little bit later, but like there's, the cop who had no problem murdering that man, while he knew he was being taped and everything, he totally had no fucking problem doing it, So you see the system that at first, it looked like they were going to try to protect him. And then they kind of like, they kind of make him as a little bit of a sacrifice, even though they don't they only charge him like third-degree murder, and they haven't charged any of the other cops. They try to offer up a little bit of a sacrifice of their own. And, order followers, pay attention to this. If any of you out there listening happen to be order followers, pay attention to this fact, that whenever the system needs to save face, it has no problem sacrificing you to gain its means. Like that's what you're there for. You're just their little flesh robot. So, note that. So they sacrifice this guy, but then you also see all these other cops, trying to save face and pandering and, kneeling and, doing shit like that. So they sacrifice the one cop, and then the other cops, as part of that, they all stand against him by, standing with the protesters and walking with them. It's like, well, who the fuck are they protesting? Like, you know what I mean? Like, police, like that's just like, that's the stupidest fucking thing, that people buy into that kind of pandering. Where were they with the other, 10,000, people they've killed, and all the other things that they've done? But, we'll get that a little more later. But what you can see is that they'll sacrifice their own people, and they'll sacrifice parts of the system to try to keep it going. Like that's them slowly destroying themselves. You can't keep doing that, and you can't continue to exist like that if you don't ever create anything. If you're just kind of this parasitic system that's always, taking and taking and taking, and then you get to the point that taking isn't enough anymore, and you kind of have to start giving away little parts of yourself, like making little sacrifices of your officers, of little pieces of the system. It's a system that is destroying itself. So, keep that in mind. Like, that's what we're watching, and it may be very chaotic to watch. But as we talked about in an episode that is going to be coming out, on chaos and order. Chaos paves the way. It makes space in order for new things to come into place. So keep that in mind. Observe that. And whenever you see the system trying harder, just take that as a sign that, like, they're having to do that out of desperation.
Mm-hmm.
And,
It's not done out of some benevolent care for the people. It's done
Yeah.
literally just to save face and try to keep things from flying completely, because they're trying to control the chaos. They don't want just complete unhinged chaos. They want controlled chaos, but their controlled chaos. That's very important as well. But yeah, I mean, there are literally hundreds of videos that you can find anywhere on the internet of cops murdering people, white cops killing white people, black cops killing black people, and whatever other combination you can think of. Ask yourself why only certain of these videos create the effect and the outrage that they do, where there's riots and all this kind of thing. Because I mean, like, for example, that white guy, that young cop shot the man in the hotel room hallway with his AR-15. He was literally crawling towards him on the floor, trying to obey the directions of the cop, and then he just blew him away. Well, that's murder. That's just as bad as what happened to George Floyd. They're both horrible tragedies, but why does one seem to mean more? Is it murder? Don't we all have the same rights? And it's just something to ask ourselves, I think, is important. Another thing we wanted to look at is how, looking at things from the pagan perspective and working with archetypes, we can see how George Floyd and the police officer both represent a certain kind of archetype that we can see, much like the Karen archetype we covered in the last Macroscope episode. They really are kind of a poster child for what they represent. Whereas, what better analogy for government itself than a knee on your throat, slowly choking the life from you? I mean, this wasn't like a gunshot and, an explosion and it was over. This was over the period of minutes. They were killing this man very, very slowly as he was telling them, "I'm dying, stop," and then the police officer, actually, I'll let you explain this one, because as we were talking about this yesterday, you had read a bit about some of the past career history of this cop that killed him.
Yeah. So no, I do think it's very interesting to, like I said, observe these different archetypes that are on the rise. And both the victim, and the criminal, the cop in this case, the murderer, represented an archetype that, just like in our Joker breakdown that we've done. If you haven't seen that, check that out. But in there, we talk about how, like, in the movie, the Joker, he really started to embody an archetype that represented the chaos, or all the feelings that were already present in the city, and he was just kind of the pressure point, or the valve through which that got channeled through. That's the same thing. Like, that very much happens, in our world, in our reality. And we saw that, there's racial tensions going on. That's one level of it. There's a lot of history with that. You have, the police brutality in general, the fact that they just murder people all the time, even though they know they're being recorded. Like, they have no problem looking the camera in the face while they slowly murder someone. Like, that's the level of confidence in their system and their gang that they have. Like, but, they've, that officer, he became that, that archetype, just like you said, that, it's that authoritarian, that knee on your throat, or that boot on your throat, that's slowly killing you, slowly taking the life force out of you, like draining the life force out of you. And I think it's interesting that, he was looking at the people recording. He had no problem with that. Just like the government has no issue with people seeing all the atrocities that they do. They have no issue seeing that they, roll out their police to control and kill people like that. That's what they want, you know. So it's very interesting that he really kind of like on a microcosmic level is a representation of that macrocosmic mindset of government as a whole, as an entity. And people.
And the cop's sitting there gaslighting them the whole entire time he's murdering him, saying, you're fine, and just calm down. That's one thing that really boils my blood, is when they're sitting there like hurting somebody really bad by how they're restraining them, and they're just screaming out like, ow, and the cop's like, calm down, God. I mean, wow, dude, like fucking psychopath.
Yeah. Gaslighting, as we talked about in our episode, The Thin Blue Lie. We did a 2-part episode about police and order followers, and keep in mind, Logan and I both come from a background of having been in the military. Obviously we were never, scummy enough to become police, but I was in the Marine Corps, and then Logan was in the Air Force, so we understand what the cult-like mentality is. We understand how that training works and what they do, and how you think when you're in the cult. But then so they have no regard for what they see as normal people, or civvies as they call them, in the military. Like they look at other people like that aren't in the cult, like, with disdain. They really fucking do. Like, they're not. They may try to play the benevolence and get attention to feed their egos and their own narcissism of, oh, we're here to protect you. They do not. The vast majority of them do not view the average person like that. Not say a blanket statement that like that every single one out there is just like totally viewing the world as scum. But as far as the training of the cult goes, like that's very much how they're trained to view people.
Yeah, some of them definitely think that they're good guys, and they're out there catching bad guys and whatnot, completely unwitting to the beast that they're doing the bidding for. But it really does depict that mini-me mentality that the elites have towards the masses as well. Like you were just talking about earlier, Brian, how they have such a disdain for just regular people. They call them things like the useless eaters and stuff, because that's literally how they see us. So why would, if they're dehumanizing us in such a way, why would they ever respect us or care about our well-being or even have any kind of empathy?
Right. Yeah. And then, it's very interesting, like, to me, that, at one point in my life, I went from having that mindset to being able to look at things now. So I can say, I'm speaking at this from experience as well. But then, as on the flip side, the other archetype that kind of showed up in this event was George, Floyd himself, like the victim, and I think he could be an archetype that represents a lot of different things, not only racial oppression, and obviously profiling, and them very much targeting and going after minorities, and feeling like they
And
can get away
poor
with
neighborhoods too.
that, and in poor neighborhoods, like, because they know that those type of people are disempowered, in the sense that they don't have the financial means to go and fight the system, to hire the lawyers, to play the game, and to do all that. So they're easier targets, they're easier to oppress. So they do that because that's what a predator will do. They'll go after the weak one, like in the herd. If they see one's old or sick or weak, they'll go after that. Well, the same thing with these people. If they see people that are disempowered financially, or they don't have the means to defend themselves, or whatever it is, they will target those people, because they view them as an easy target. Not that those people are inherently weak or anything. That's the exact opposite of what we are teaching on the show at all. But that's how they are viewing it. But with George, so he represented that archetype of racial profiling, as well as, we mentioned the archetype of just the average person who was just living their life, and then all of a sudden government thugs come in and murder him. And for anyone trying to defend it, keep in mind, they're like, oh, he may have tried to pull counterfeit money. Like, it was the owner of the shop already came out and said that he was a regular customer. That's not what should have happened at all. Even if it was a counterfeit, it's a $20 bill. And if you are pissed off about counterfeit money, look at the fucking Federal Reserve. Like, that's what I have to say to those fucking people that are trying to defend that. But it just goes to show you, like, that cop, like, this over a fake $20 bill, like, they murdered a man. like,
Mhm.
in cold blood. And that cop, like, he was very much enjoying what he was doing. Like, personally, I would say the guy probably like has some kind of sadistic tendency, because
Mhm.
sadists, they very much like the reaction that they're getting from their victim, and
Mhm.
it's the reactions, the fear of people around them that they like. And
Mhm.
he just stood there and he watched, and he like looked at those reactions, but like with no emotion or anything. But like inside his, he's probably just fucking getting his rocks off. Like the guy, he's, fuck that guy. Let's just say that. Uh, but we can see that these expressions of these archetypes, they come through because what's going on the metaphysical level, on the psychological level within the collective consciousness, that has to get expressed in the reality field somehow. So some
Mhm.
event like this happens. That doesn't mean that he was a crisis actor, or we have to get into the huge realm of conspiracies to recognize that what the deep state will do is know these kind of crises are going to come up, and they're just waiting to do things. So whenever they see the opportunity, it's
Mhm.
really easy for them to pounce on it very quickly. They have all the resources in place. They have media to hype people up. They've already got police and military that they're already, you're ready to go all the time. That you can be mobilized in anywhere in a very short time. So it's not like it takes them a lot to really get that going. Uh, Now, we can also recognize that there are definitely some elements of what you could label as conspiracy to this. Obviously, them playing on the charge, seeing that like police are delivering bricks to different points in the city, or getting caught on video bashing their own cars, or suspicious people like that guy with the black umbrella and everything, like that, was busting out the windows and starting things. That you can really tell these people are cops. Like they are trying to create that chaos. So people people are asking for them to come help, because they know nobody actually fucking needs them. They need to create the illusion that people need them, so they will try to do that. So and we see that like these bricks, they're showing up in cities all over. Like there's definitely a element of organization to them. I can tell you that like I used to be like a load builder, and work at a hardware store and everything, and drive pallets of these things around all the time. One, like they're not cheap, especially like some of the ones I saw, they were like paver stones that were like really they're like intricate shapes, so they cost a good amount of money. And each of these pallets weigh a good like 4,000 to 6,000 pounds. Like you need a forklift to move them around. Uh, and then you just have tons of these just showing up all over. Like you can recognize that there's some level of organization there,
Mhm.
and then you see the videos coming out, sure enough, that cops are getting caught doing undercover things, or busting out windows on their own cars, or so on and so forth, in order to try to build this narrative, this illusion that there's a war on cops, so we need to roll in more people, because what's happening? I just said before, it's a dying system. They're realizing just how powerless they are, and the people are realizing just how strong we are. Like
Mhm.
we saw a police station get like taken over with no you know with people that didn't really have any military training or tactics, or even they weren't even doing it necessarily in like a what you could consider like a combative or in a warfare way. They were just rioting, and the
Mhm.
cops fucking ran.
Yeah.
Like they really
Matter,
are cowards.
matter of fact, like to me, I'm kind of getting this image in my mind of I like to think about the very rich allegory of X-Men, the X-Men world. I really like that universe. I think there's a lot of really cool kind of, like I said, allegory metaphors for things that are playing out in real life. Well, so you just said the people are just beginning to realize their power. Well, there's a whole lot of steps past that point of actually, refining it, learning how to channel it correctly and responsibly. So think about X-Men. Professor X goes out and finds young mutants that they don't have any like purpose. They're just kind of like they're not plugged into an organization or a group or a family that has some kind of a shared goal of positive change. They're just angry because the world never understood them and always treated them like a freak, and now they're just kind of lashing out aimlessly and angrily. Well, that's what these riots are. These people are destroying businesses and property that had absolutely nothing to do with what they're angry about. They're just mad and they like furious, but they feel like they have to do something, but they don't understand natural law, and they don't have this understanding of the world, so they don't know what to do, so they just kind of do things that don't make a lot of sense, you know. But like look at like you said yourself, Brian, what you know, maybe it's the broken clock that's accidentally right twice a day. With the police station thing, you know, again, I'm not necessarily condoning violence, but at least they were somewhat closer to the root of their anger there than when they're burning business buildings down. But imagine if they can do that, this completely disorganized, chaotic force of angry mob can do that. Well, just imagine what like a well-trained militia that is responsible and very well, you know, trained and with clear goals and clear objectives that are actually solving the problems.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that militia can be played out in many ways. That doesn't necessarily mean you're using it in a aggressive way. Militia can very much be used in a defensive way, even if it's just people who are out there that are they're totally 100% against the the state and the officer murdering people, but yet at the same time, they recognize that businesses don't deserve to be looted, so they're out there standing guard or whatever. Like they're standing in a balanced state, and you show up like that, or you have a protest, an armed protest. All of a sudden, the cops are a lot less likely to start using that force. Like they love going up against unarmed people because they're a predator. They want a weak target. That target has claws and teeth. All of a sudden, they think twice before trying to pounce. It's a basic it's a basic nature thing. But I think what's interesting to note about the destruction of things is that, again, I don't think it's just this black and white thing. I think there's levels, and there's a lot of different things going on. There probably is some legitimate destruction of things going on from people who are just really fucking angry, and that they maybe some of those bricks got left out, and they just they fell for the bait, and they decided to pick one up and bust out a window or something. But I also think that there's very much organized destruction going on, like with the Antifa people being bussed in, and like you're seeing a lot of these reports that a lot of the people being arrested that were like doing a lot of the major damage and destruction weren't even from that town. They all got bussed in. There's videos of people that were actually peaceful protesters catching other people like spray painting things or busting out windows, and they're like, stop that, why are you doing that? They're going to blame that on us. Like so the people that act, the community that actually has a 100% valid reason to be pissed off and is out there peacefully, demonstrating and everything, there's that element. But then there's also, people, provocateurs that are being brought in to try to create this chaos, both with, rioters and protesters, being brought in. They really don't give a fuck about that man's death. What they really care about is being able to tap into that charge to push their agenda, and then there's the police who are just doing destruction themselves to try to create delusion and that we need them, because they're scared, and they want the military to get called in, and they want Big Brother to get called in because they're fucking terrified right now, and they see how quickly every single one of them could be strung the fuck up if people got that mad. Like they're starting to realize that. So there's definitely a lot to look at and make sure that we're using nuance to look at all the different variables going on.
Right. You don't want to paint with too broad a brush and just kind of lump things in clunkily into little categories and stuff when it's not.
Right.
It's oversimplifying things.
Right.
And yeah, I definitely see the Antifa thing too. They're really pushing. Anytime they cover that, they say anarchist and anarchy, and like you can tell they're really trying to drive that one home in the minds of the people, because I think people are more receptive than ever to the principles of what freedom actually is, and how, wow, wait a minute, all this doesn't feel right. Why why should they have so much power, and look how they're poorly managing it, like what is this all for, but that to me gives credence to the validity of the principles of sovereignty, and the fact that they're so terrified by it that they have to proactively demonize the word and associate it with mindless chaos and destruction, which is the exact opposite, and yet such a perfect example of this doublespeak. And so, regarding the name that we put into the title, race baiting, that the word bait is right in there. You have to still make a choice to take that bait. If you put some meat inside a cage, like that whatever you catch in there willingly walked in there on their own free will, and that's literally the name of their game, because they understand natural law. They know that they can't actually control people. All they can do is make people think that what they want is being put in front of them, and making them think that that's their idea and that's in their best interest when it's not. But the racism thing, I mean, this is kind of really getting into the epicenter of what we wanted to get into on this episode, because there's so many layers to it, from the when it's racism, and it's police brutality, and it's government power, and all these things are kind of playing into it in a very rich and nuanced way. So we wanted to kind of unpack that. It's ironic to me that the people are unable to see through the facade of this veil of racism is being touted on all the institutions, that this is what the problem is. It's that it's institutional racism, right? But that's not the cause of the problem, because, as I just said before, like, there's all types of brutality going on from between all sorts of combinations of ethnicities and things like that. Clearly, the problem is the belief in authority itself, because without government, racism could have never been institutionalized. The institution itself is the problem, not the particular flavor of slavery that we've all, agreed upon.
Well, yeah, and I guess for me, like, it's important to remember that, and this is one of the things that I enjoy about the animist or pagan perspective, is that you get out of the black and white thinking of thinking has to be this or that, and you can recognize that it's both, that there's levels of both going on. That, like, there definitely is a problem with racism, and especially when that racism gets power because it becomes institutionalized. Then it gets a legal footing, or a socially acceptable footing, in order to or a foundation to build off of. And that's where it can really become such an issue, where it's like, if the authoritarian state didn't exist, that institution didn't exist, it wouldn't have that foundation to build off of. Like, there might still just there's always going to be some fucking idiot out there that hates themselves so much that they project that in their worldview onto everybody else. But they wouldn't have a power, or the badge to hide behind in order to be able to, like, kill people right there in broad daylight. So I think it's both, that that there's that, but there's also this problem with the the state itself existing, that it's you can see that it doesn't care who it is really brutalizing. It may target certain groups more than others, but when it really comes down to it at the fundamental level, it's not. It's because they go for, like I was talking about earlier. They're a predator. Like, the psychopathic mindset is it's an interspecies predator. So they're going to go after whatever prey they feel is, like, disadvantaged or easy prey to go after. So they'll target specific groups, like, because they perceive it that way. And if they see another group or another target that they feel is like that, it doesn't necessarily matter with the ethnicity or things like that, as much as it's just the opportunity that they're that they're kind of pouncing on. Like I said, there's elements of everything involved. We're talking about issues that deal with millions and billions of people worldwide. So there's never there's no way there's just this black and white answer to everything, where it's just this simplistic thing. There's going to be a lot of different variables and factors at play, creating what we're experiencing.
Hmm. Right. Yeah, you can kind of examine the hierarchy of cause and effect. The universe isn't so simple that there's just this one cause and this one effect. There were many causes and many effects of everything happening around us at any given time. You know, there's a ripple effect in this, that the feedback loop that I've talked about. What people are outraged about is an act of brutality. And then they're attributing that brutality. So that's like the very bottom of the rung. That's what happened, right? It was brutality. And then they're saying it's because of racist police, right? So this implies that if racism wasn't playing a role in how law enforcement are conducting their duties, that everything would just be hunky dory, like that. Like this is the root of the problem. But you see, it goes much higher than that. Government corruption is playing into the racist aspect, but it's also playing out in a lot of other ways, many other ways, in fact, if you're looking at the whole pie and all the different areas that government has like managed to wrap its tentacles around every aspect of human life, from education to food. I mean, it's everywhere. And that, if we just removed racism, then it would all go away. But see, government corruption itself comes from government power. That power corrupts, right? So the power shouldn't and can't actually be given in the first place. You can't give a right or an ability to anyone else that you yourself don't possess. So if I can't break into your house or steal your things or take part of your paycheck and call it taxes, then I can't vote for someone else to do it and call it legitimate and moral and necessary. It's a complete farce. And so government power is only given illusory because of the belief in the legitimacy of authority. If people didn't think that, the government actually had power and authority, that's the only power that they actually have, is the power that we perceive them to have. So once we stop believing in that, it does go away because it was never there. It's an illusion. But people believe in the legitimacy of authority because they themselves lack individual sovereignty. And that comes from their disempowered mindsets. So now we've finally taken that cause, or that effect, of brutality all the way back up to the fact that people are carrying around disempowered mindsets. Mentalism is the first hermetic principle. It comes first and everything else comes off of that. So what I'm really saying here is the disempowered mindsets, which insist that government is necessary in order to maintain order, is really the root of it all. The principle of mentalism, you have to take it back down to the core of it. Whereas what's causing, where is creation emanating from? The deepest layers of consciousness in here. So that's pretty much in a nutshell, our 2 cents on really the gooey epicenter of not only the cause of the problem, but therein lies the solution.
Yeah, it's good to always dig down to the root and find those actual causal factors of why things are playing out the way they are. And that belief in authority, like I said, taking it back to the principle mentalism, the mindset, that really is the root of the problem. Whether you're looking at that from the perspective of racism, even if you want to look at the problem with racism, that problem goes back to the mind. The problem with authority, the problem goes back to the mind. It's that's where it's all playing out. So we have to be very careful of what we're lending our mind's energy to, our life force energy to, and like what we're getting behind. Make sure that we're bringing discernment to that.
There is actually one last thing that I wanted to add to what you were saying as well, is we want to acknowledge and be sympathetic to the disparity of minorities in this country. It's fucked up. Like there is a lot of it going on, which we acknowledge that. It's that labeling the whole thing as just a racist problem is very short-sighted, because the very same system has created such a victimhood mentality of minorities, especially black people, because of the horrors of slavery, and that went on. That was protected by the state. That's why it perpetuated for so long. It was only when good people started saying this is bullshit and fighting back against it did things actually change. So that's very important to remember. It's not that it's not at play. It's that the problem goes beyond the scope of your own identity, just because there's such a desire coming from that deep place of pain and trauma to seek that validation for that experience and that ancestral trauma that's still playing out today.
Mhm. Yeah, and yeah, that's definitely good to acknowledge. It's that whole, we've talked about before with ancestral trauma, that whole hurt people,
Mhm.
like that, if you repeat that phrase, hurt people, it will kind of build this almost like, you know, rhythm to it that it kind
Like a
of like
mantra.
take off as like, yeah, it'll like take on like a momentum of its own. Well, in the very same way, people that are very traumatized when they're acting from an unconscious place, when they're acting from their unconscious trauma, when they're not coming from a place of awareness, they perpetuate that cycle of trauma, whether they're meaning to or not. That's just, if they don't have the tools to know how to navigate and deal with their pain and how to properly work through that, and especially when it's, something that is, it's not an individual trauma. It's a societal level trauma. It's within a whole race or a whole different group of people. It can apply in a variety of ways.
Mhm.
But when that applies and it's multi-generational, like it went on for a long time, that's not anything that just goes away in the blink of an eye. It's something that's there. There's a lot to express with it, and every individual is going to express it in their own way. That's why you're going to see a variety of actions. You're going to see people
Mhm.
saying that, like, no, we need to stay very peaceful. You're going to see other people that are like, no, we want to burn it to the fucking ground.
Mhm.
Like they're all kind of working through it in their own way, and that's
Mhm.
why it's important to bring awareness that, like, this is what we're all doing, because then we can start making conscious choices with how we're processing it. Process it in a healthy way. Don't buy in to the baiting that the system is trying to use to further its own agenda, because the system
Mhm.
doesn't actually give a fuck. Like it wants to be able to bring in as much control as it can because it sees itself dying. So we need to
Mhm.
keep in mind that, like, they're very fucking weak, and the last fucking thing they would want right now is people getting past very petty and ideas that, like, somebody is better than another because, like, the color of their skin, like getting past petty things like racism and uniting and all operating from a conscious place as a human family. That's the last thing they want, because they can't control that. you know like, you have to just kind of hold up the mirror to them. That's something that I've been recognizing, that, like, and especially with, like, a lot of these very radical leftists that, like, we see this influence of the deep state coming in. You'll see online that they will get into arguments, and people just throw their own logic up against it. Like, they won't get into any kind of crazy thing. They'll just, like, throw up their own logic, and the people kind of fizzle out. Like, there's another example I saw, and this was with the COVID thing. I saw, and I shared this on Facebook, but there was a YouTube video that
Oh yeah.
there was this reporter who he was saying this report, and they're talking about the mask, and no one's wearing their mask, and they're like, are they just not afraid for their health? Trying to, you look at the words that the media is using, these fucking little scumbags. They're very much trying to incite fear and everything, and they must not be worried about it and all this. And then this older gentleman who's just a normal guy comes by with his phone, and you can tell he's recording them, and he's like, and he says it loud enough, he knows he can get heard on the news, and it was, they were live broadcasting it. And he's like, yeah, and neither is your cameraman or half your film crew. Like, what did he do? He didn't have to argue him. He didn't have to act crazy or anything. He literally just held up the mirror. Like, the news crew was trying to have one view of reality,
Mhm.
that like there was one angle that where they're showing what did he do? He took his own ability to do the exact same thing, because the average man has the exact same power as the ruling class right now, which is one of
Mhm.
the amazing things about this time. Flip it, show the other angle that like, oh, they're just lying. Their narrative is so poor now. They're doing so terribly. All you have to do is hold up the mirror. You don't
Mhm.
have to exert a lot of energy. Like just this normal average guy just strolling by, going about his business, just held up the mirror and just smashed their narrative, just showed them how they're lying. And that reporter just he immediately like looked away like a beat dog or something. Like he just looks so defeated because he knows he just got fucking caught lying and pushing a bullshit narrative.
And he
And then
started hemming and hawing, like, yeah, like, and just trying to like try to maintain some, but it was just pathetic. You could tell he
got
was
destroyed.
really
Yeah.
embarrassed. Yeah.
So so that's a challenge I would like to put out to everybody up there, like as kind of an operating procedure for dealing
Hmm.
with the system, with the media, like with the Karens out there or the order followers, like all these people, this whole system that is just so crazy.
Hmm.
It's so ugly that all you have to do is hold up the mirror to it,
Hmm.
because when it does that, it sees itself. That's why the system is destroying itself, is because that
Right.
mirror is getting held up, and it's that easy. So just hold up the mirror. That I think this would be a good experiment to do as a way of kind of using this as an operating procedure of that you let them do their thing, and then you reflect it back to them. Because remember, we've talked about before on the show, everything in the universe is a projection and a reflection.
Hmm. Hmm.
The system's projection, of what it is so terrible, so unnatural, that once it sees itself, it eats itself alive, and
Hmm.
that's all you have to do.
It's ironic. Just the other day, I was watching with my partner a movie called True Romance, and it's this like kind of mobster movie, real gritty. And there's this part where James Gandolfini is beating the ever living shit out of the main female lead, and he just threw her in the shower through a pane of glass. There's like blood everywhere, and her face is all fucked up, and she starts laughing at him as he's looming over her, and he's like, "What? What are you laughing at?" And she goes, "You look ridiculous." And like he like turns around and starts like fixing his hair in the mirror and stuff like that. And I just every time I see that, I think it's such a great depiction of that sort of bardic magic that we talk about a lot on the channel, of how just laughing at how ridiculous they are takes every bit of their fucking power, because when you're laughing, you are not afraid, and that's what the entire thing runs on, is fear.
Yeah, absolutely. No, so it's very good, in holding up the mirror, like using funny memes that are mocking the system, like the stupidity, the absurdity of it. That's what
Mm-hmm.
you're doing. You're holding up the mirror. So just keep that in mind, and every time you see some stupidity or something like that, just think to yourself, hold up the mirror, and just reflect it back. Don't get drawn in to these emotional arguments that are gone out. Like if there are people that are so far gone that they're still bought into the system, like that, it's this obvious and they're still bought into it, they're not worth wasting your energy on. Like
Mm-hmm.
spend your time, find your tribe, your family, like get to your creativity, and just keep reflecting back to the system just how much it's destroying itself, and it will keep doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, another tool to be able to kind of get a larger perspective that I really find useful, we've talked about a lot on the show, is using astrology to kind of look at the cosmic weather, the psychic weather, the psychological weather, however, whatever phrase you want to use, but essentially looking at what's going on in the macrocosm to then see as a reflection of what's going on down here.
Mm-hmm.
So there's definitely a few interesting things going on right now. So in our first macrocosm episode, I spoke about the big role of Rahu. Rahu, for those of you who aren't familiar with Vedic astrology, and keep in mind, I practice Vedic astrology. So this is Eastern astrology. It's based off of the sidereal zodiac, not the tropical zodiac, which is the Western astrology a lot of people are familiar with. So, if there's terms or phrases that you're not familiar with or whatever, feel free to like, drop a question, in the comments or anything like that. But I'll try to make sure I'm explaining everything to where, everybody gets the point. But so for those of you who don't know, Rahu is the north node of the moon. And in Vedic astrology, he kind of represents that trickster energy. He represents illusion. He represents our desires, all the different things we want to accomplish. So Rahu can kind of be a force that can, like most things, he's neutral, but he can be good or bad. But he's kind of a very explosive energy, very, very much kind of like a nuclear bomb. And he has been in the sign of Gemini, which is all about relationships, how we interact with other people, communication, different things. And Gemini tends to be a sign that has like a dualistic nature to it, in the sense that it can go either way. So, Rahu has been in Gemini for a few months, and it was in the Ardra nakshatra, which I explained on the previous episode. This is a nakshatra that it's all about a storm, but it's a storm that's ultimately about like destruction in order to clear the way for something new, so we can gain, we can learn higher lessons from that. So we had been going through this storm. We could see that there was this deception, this Rahu, this deception coming in Gemini that was creating the storm. In other words, media was lying about COVID. They were hyping it all up, doing their normal thing, and it created this worldwide storm that was very transformative. It really has shifted a lot of things in our world. It utterly changed the playing field. Well, Rahu recently moved out of Ardra and moved into Mrigasira. So it's still in Gemini, so it's still in the same sign, but it has moved into a different nakshatra. And I guess I didn't mention in Vedic astrology, we also have lunar constellations, which are known as nakshatras. There's 27 of them, and each of them are associated with their own elements, gods, planets, deities, animals, and all that different stuff. So the Mrigasira nakshatra is symbolized by a deer, like a deer head, but a deer head that's searching for the forest. So this is a nakshatra that is all about searching for the answers through the forest. The forest can be very dense, hard to see through, but it's this deer that's, just kind of searching and seeking, So when we can see this with Rahu's illusion, he's been in Gemini, there's been this storm, we've realized we've all been lied to, that like this whole storm, this whole COVID thing was this giant lie. Now they're, moving it onto riots. We're very, very quickly discovering that that's also a lie. So that's that Mrigasira energy that Rahu is working with now, because we now realize that that's been there. There's a storm. So now we're seeking for like, well, why did this happen? What are the solutions to get out of it? What are all these things? But there's still that element of confusion there, because Rahu is a shadow planet. He's still kind of there's still that element of confusion with him. And then, it's still in Gemini, which is our communication, our relationship. So people are still wondering, well, should they wear masks? Should they social distance? Should they, how should we interact with other people? The whole question of like racism, how should we treat each other as human beings? People are seeing that there's these storms that have been brought up, that are, that have created these illusions. So now we're in the process of seeking for the answers for that, which is a good process, because that process is what really helps us start to move forward and start to bring that kind of healing. So, we're going to see a lot more truth of what has been going on coming out. We're like how we got duped, how we got fooled, how like, for example, like they're doing these riots, and almost within days people are showing that like, oh, these bricks are being placed by cops, or they're breaking out their own windows. The illusion is being exposed very, very quickly when it comes into that nakshatra. So, that's interesting to know. And, Mercury is also sitting there in Gemini, but it's sitting in the Ardra nakshatra. So that storm, Mercury's our communication, it's our intellect, it's our reason. So people are still very much intellectually, they're still trying to figure out what's going on. Very much like this episode was all about discernment. We were using the left brain here. This is that Mercury energy. We're tapping into it. We're trying to communicate about what are all the pieces, what's really happening. So we're all still trying to like figure that out, and there's still kind of like that element of confusion in there, because like Rahu's still sitting in there, and then beyond that, obviously if Rahu's sitting there in Gemini, K2's sitting in Sagittarius, and it's in the Mula nakshatra, which is where it's been. I mentioned on it before. So this is us, K2's this very kind of spiritual planet, and Sagittarius is a sign that's all about seeking out practical spiritual wisdom, like really seeing what our beliefs are, and that Mula nakshatra is all about being able to be nurtured, but also find like the root causes of things. So through this whole process over like as long, Cage has been here over the last few months, we have seen collectively we've all been kind of reevaluating our beliefs. Like, so it's been this question, it's been between going through Rahu and questioning things and like, a lot of communication of how things should work, and then falling back on, okay, so this is what I'm believing now, or I think this is true, or this is what I think is important in my life. This is where I need to spend my energy. That, those kinds of things can be seen with that. And then we also have, the Jupiter Saturn conjunction in Capricorn, which I talked about a little bit last time. But right now, both of them are retrograde. You know, so Saturn is in its own sign of Capricorn. So that's, Capricorn. That's all about teaching us to be disciplined, to be organized, to stay focused with something, and keep at it in the long term, because it's a Saturnian lesson. Saturn's a slow moving planet. So the lessons that we learn from it, they're hard. It feels like there's pressure on us, and they take a while to learn. But once we have them, we retain them for a while. So it's all about that energy. When Saturn's going retrograde, it means we're feeling that more. It's making us take that energy and really take it inward and reflect on ourselves. Okay, so like, what do I need to do in my life to move forward, to accomplish these things that I want to accomplish? It's a time of really reevaluating, like, what is worth putting your energy into and what is not, whether that's in a relationship, a job, whatever it may be. There's a lot of introspection going on in that. That's the lesson that Saturn's trying to teach us with this. And then Jupiter being here, Jupiter's wanting to expand us, spiritually. So there's kind of like this tension in regards to Jupiter's this planet that wants to expand us, and then Saturn is a planet that teaches us through kind of like putting pressure on us. So they're kind of these what seem like conflicting forces, and it can make it seem that like people that they'll want these goals, they'll want to achieve these things, but they'll kind of lose hope. Like Jupiter feels like it loses hope here a little bit because of that pressure of Saturn. So how that could play out on in regards to this is be like, people seeing and wanting to have a better world where there's not racism. Like that's a Jupiter lesson. Like that everybody, we're a human family. Like we're all equal. We're all spiritual beings. We all have value and deserve to be loved and cared for, and not, not murdered in the fucking street. So you see this, but so Jupiter here can feel a loss of hope. So we can see that people are then, we're wanting to see this world where we have these higher spiritual values at play, but there's this pressure of Saturn that's like making it like hard to get there. That like, oh yeah, we have all these issues, all these things that are really deep-seated, deep-rooted problems that we have to work through, not only as individuals but like collectively together. So it's going to take time. That society, that beautiful world where we can all really truly respect each other in that Jupiterian way, like that's not something that just happens instantly. It takes that hard work and that dedication. So we have to remember that. And Jupiter's retrograde right now, so it's a time of also, when Jupiter goes retrograde, it tests those spiritual beliefs, like, that people standing up for what they believe in happens when retrograde happens. Like you get that fire energy, like we can all see like that, how that cop murdered that man. We get really fucking pissed off when we see it, as you should. That's a Jupiter retrograde energy. You see something wrong and you don't put up with it. And then we have Venus, another big one here to look at as well, as Venus is in Taurus. So it's doing an interesting thing here, and I mentioned this before, that Venus is sitting in its own sign of Taurus, and normally it only stays in a sign for like about a month or so, but it's staying here for about 4 months through most of the summer. So that's something that doesn't happen very often, and that's a very good thing. It makes us want to enjoy those pleasures of life. It makes us want to have that stability. Taurus is an earth sign, it's represented by the bull. It wants to have that stability. So it's us. There's been this whole thing, the economy's got shaken up. People don't know whether they have their jobs. Their sense of stability has totally been taken. But there's this urge to really want to have that. And then Venus is retrograde, so then that increases that. That makes us really start to look at, oh well, what really happened during this whole lockdown. So we saw these news stories coming out about, oh, these were the effects of this, that millions of jobs are lost, all these businesses are destroyed, and people are actually having to look and see that, oh, well, maybe that stability, maybe that comfort in life that I thought I had, isn't really there. So there, there's kind of this sense of urgency you can see maybe building up in a lot of people. And not only is Venus retrograde, but it's also combust right now. So whenever a planet is combust, that means it's sitting very close to the sun. The sun's very hot, so it kind of burns that planet. So whenever Venus is retrograding and combust, what that means is it's as close to the Earth as it's going to get. Like that's the closest it ever gets to Earth. So you're then feeling the effects of Venus very strongly right now. Like people are really wanting to feel that sense of stability. Okay, so like, what are we going to do with the economy? Like, how are we going to not only provide just that normal stability, but get back to enjoying life? And there's, all this pressure, all these things going on that are kind of preventing that. And then, that combust energy comes in there as well. It makes it to where that feeling of the pleasures of the things that we can enjoy, that kind of gets burnt. So it feels like that, like no matter what we're trying, or like no matter what you're doing to want to be heard, or to have basic human rights, or to be able to have stability in the world, like that's just not happening. It's just kind of falling on deaf ears. That can kind of be a feeling that comes up with this placement. So there's a lot of very intense energy going on right now, and obviously there's a lot of other stuff going on too, but those were the big ones that were kind of sticking out for me, that I really wanted to touch on. But you can see how those kind of play into that overall theme of like what we're feeling, that there's these different astrological transitions that are happening, and then we're seeing like different transitions play out with what's going on. That for example, like the COVID storm, like that got that really got blown up into this big thing, and then now we're questioning and seeing the repercussions from that. Like, how's that going to affect us as individuals and as a society, and how we're going to move forward from that, and get back to having that kind of stability, and things like that. So astrology is always a very useful tool to be able to kind of step back, get a bigger picture, and recognize that like these energies are at play no matter what. Like regardless of like what the system is doing, like this isn't 100% like the system or the deep state. Like they don't have that much power. Like they're just as much subject to all of this as we are. Like they're we're all part of the same system of nature. So by observing nature, you can see that nature, there's a tumultuous time going on. There's a little bit of chaos. There's certain things, but we can see that's all part of this really beautiful process that allows us to grow and to learn and to thrive, and to start getting rid of belief systems that are destructive, whether that be racism or statism or any other belief system that is fundamentally disempowering us. Because as we talked about earlier, it's that foundational disempowerment that all of the destruction, all of this chaos that the deep state can cause is built off of.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. You have such a great gift with astrology, and what a deep and profound divine tome of wisdom it can be as a tool. So really great stuff to get into. So to conclude, we wanted to share some of our thoughts on solutions. This is just, again, our thoughts. These are just things that we would put higher on priority of things that are helpful and healthy and conducive to being constructive as we navigate this very tumultuous time. So really, this is a very exciting time to be alive. One can deeply feel empathy and mourn for the tragic injustices that are happening, and still have an eye on the bigger picture, and can appreciate and get excited about the things that are happening in the bigger picture, like where we're heading. It could go either way, and of course things can and possibly will get worse before they get better, but understanding that it's riding the waves in the ocean, and that it's It's all taking you where you're trying to get to in a roundabout kind of way. So it's important to stay in that mindset and not get sucked into the fear and the anger, because those things, they bring your consciousness down to a less than optimal level. And the only one responsible for your state of mind is you. You choose what you're feeding with your energy, with your attention, and your emotions. And so it's important to stay in a very centered, healthy, balanced space, and stay connected with what's happening and in each other, despite social distancing. I mean, it's so funny, like you were just explaining how this is all about learning how to relate to each other, and then here's this completely fabricated imposition of how things ought to be that has people afraid of each other. Like literally, you said you on the other episode, the mother afraid to hug her children and all this kind of stuff. It's so ironic. I mean, you can see this is what's happening. They just understand, and they're tapping into that, and they're wielding it as a weapon against freedom and all the things that are good in the world. So we don't have to let that happen. We have a choice in this, and just being able to transmute it into something positive. Don't let a crisis go to waste. It's not that you're excited that people are hurting. It's that you understand that you can use this as a catalyst for doing something good and leaving a lasting positive imprint, despite the things that have to get destroyed in the process of it. Right. Awakening, if evolution, is a very messy, challenging, painful, and destructive process, and that can be beautiful, and it is beautiful if you can truly see that for what it is.
Right, exactly, and that's when we see that chaos and destruction and things like that are happening by tapping into that charge and then being able to use it. So you wield it. So what needs to be destroyed? The illusion that some people are better than others. And that applies to both racism and statism, the belief in authority. Exactly. Some people are fucking better than others. That is what we need to destroy, like in Smash. So tap into that charge, like use it, because there is the potential to create so much beauty out of chaotic times like this, that there is a lot of charge to it. This is a great time to go through in your life and destroy any of your own illusions, destroy the things that aren't helpful for you. If you're in a toxic relationship, like get the fuck out of it. Stop allowing yourself to be drained. Like that's something that we're all, looking at these kind of things and reevaluating. So you destroy the things that you don't need in your life, and you start creating and building and filling your life with the things that you do want. You start creating the reality that you do want to see and that you do want to experience. So you observe it, as far as like how to go about dealing with the world, like observe what's going on, like kind of read that psychic weather, put things under the macroscope and look at them. But then be able to just hold up the mirror. And then in regards, and that's how you combat it. Like you don't need to do anything other than like hold up the mirror. And then in your own regards to your own life, keep developing your own consciousness, your own awareness. Like step into your own creativity of like designing and doing whatever you're wanting to that is a new thing in your life. Like I said, I've mentioned before, I've recently, been researching and getting into like mushrooms, and I'm going to get into growing gourmet mushrooms and things, because that's, just something I'm interested in, and I love doing that kind of stuff. So rather than looking at all the fear porn or anything, I've spent my time researching that, learning a whole new skill set and preparing to do that. So that's just an example. So whatever it is that, your creativity gets brought out through, like whatever it is you want to do, put your energy into that, into your own self-development, and then hold the mirror up to the system. And if we keep doing both of those things, we're going to be just fine. We're going to watch a system destroy itself, and we're going to be able to create such a beautiful world where we get out of these centralized belief systems that allow us to be controlled and put all of our power outside of ourselves, and we start taking that power back. We can create anything we want to.
Absolutely. So essentially, welcome to Ragnarok. Just fucking and try to enjoy the ride. Try to enjoy yourself a little bit. It's like Bill Hicks said. they've gone through a lot of trouble to set up this ride and make sure it's super scary, but it's just a ride, you know, like you get on, you get off, coming and going, just flow with it. So yeah, that's going to conclude the episode, but we also have a very exciting announcement to make as well, that we're going to be starting some new types of content that will be featuring on a brand new Patreon page that we're setting up. It's not quite ready yet, but we wanted to kind of go ahead and announce that this is happening because these Macroscope segments is one of the things that we'll be moving on to that Patreon platform. So essentially what this is, you know, this platform is really about supporting content creators. So, you know, we're not pushing anything. We're simply giving people who want to support us of their own free will a way to do that it's mutually beneficial. It helps us survive, and it helps people get more of the content that they love. So it's a win-win.
The Patreon is only going to get more valuable as time goes on. You know, 'cause
Exactly.
we're only adding more and more content to. So, you know, but it's something that, you know, not everybody is fully interested in. It takes a lot of time, a lot of dedication. So that's why we're putting it on Patreon. So for those who are more dedicated, you know, and how they're going about, you know, trying to study and want to learn more, they can then have access to it. It's more private, you know, but we can still keep the regular channel with our normal free content, which, you know, is always going to remain free. So there's always going to be all that content on top of this extra content that we're going to start creating and bringing as well to bring.
Yeah, that's a good point. Our YouTube channel is also going to continue to get more and more value, and we're just putting that all out for free. So I mean, this is just it's like a buffet, you know, give it, like, take what you like and leave the rest. So that's we're really excited about announcing all of that stuff, and that'll be coming up here in the next several weeks. Again, if you're new, please subscribe, and if you haven't checked out our website, check that out at thewizardfactory.com. This is pretty much the one-stop shop for everything that we do and that we offer, as well as follow us on social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram, and of course our newish audio podcast that's now available on Spotify, iTunes, and all major platforms on Anchor. And so that's going to conclude today's episode. We hope you enjoyed it. And until next week, be empowered, inspired, and encouraged.